cattle and donkeys. Donkeys you can ride. The cattle and the sheep you could eat, but you'd be smart not to, because they can also provide you clothing. You know, the wool from the sheep. Goats can provide milk, so they didn't apparently eat them for meat. So instead, they used them as barter, and that was the money that they used with their livestock. And when that year was over, they came back again and said, we can't hide from you the fact that, you know, we don't have any money to give you. We don't have any more livestock and stuff to give you. We have nothing left except ourselves. So they sold themselves into slavery. This was kind of common, just so you're not thinking, oh, this is horrible. Well, it isn't great, but it was a common thing that you were allowed to do. That you could be purchased as an entity like any other valuable property in exchange for food. In other words, you would work the land. You would you basically were in slavery, but what was called an indentured servant, meaning until you paid off your debt, you did what you were told to do by the person who owned the land. And they said, if you will please just give us seed so we will live and not die. So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt, since now it's just the people in their land. That's all they got to offer. So he bought it all up for the Pharaoh. So now the Pharaoh isn't just governing over, he actually owns it all. And Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. However, he did not buy the land of the priests, because this is in verse 22, because they received a regular allotment from the Pharaoh anyway. And so they had food enough from that allotment that Pharaoh gave them. And so that's why they didn't sell that land. And now that he said he's bought everything, here is the seed. When the crop comes in, give 1/5 of the crop to Pharaoh and keep the other 4/5. You keep that to seed the fields and to make food for yourselves and for your households and your children. And they said, you saved our lives. In other words, he wasn't being greedy. He just had to have an order about how they went about doing this. And you got to have something for something. And so they said, you've saved our lives. And they said, we'll be in bondage to Pharaoh. And they considered it a positive. So Joseph established it as a law. And it says right here, and that is still in force today. And that was at the time that Genesis was written. Isn't that interesting? Because I'm thinking, and it's still true today, as of my today. That was their today. And it says now that Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen. Now you see, you've just gone 2 chapters, and we already said that. So you're getting a recount again here. But it's good, because it just kind of recounts it in our brain. So it's not bad to see it repeated over and over. And they acquired the property there, and they were fruitful, and they increased greatly in number. That means in people. And then eventually in crops, right? Because they had the seeds. So Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. So this is Jacob. He lived in Egypt 17 years. And the years of his life were 147. And when the time drew near for Israel to die, Jacob, when it time for Israel to die, same person, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, if I found favor in your eyes at all, put your hand under my thigh and make the promise that will show me kindness and faithfulness, that you do not bury me in Egypt. And remember that when you would grab under the thigh, besides the fact that it's especially close to the privates, it's a very personal thing to do. It's a symbolism in it. You're very close. You're face to face with somebody when you're making this promise. It's a point of truth and commitment, and it's very personal. And it's saying, so swear that you will bury me where I want to be buried, and not here in Egypt. But that I can go, when I rest, that I can be carried out of Egypt and bury me where my fathers are buried. And he says, I will do as you say. And that's what Joseph said. And then Jacob said, Israel said, swear to me. And Israel worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff, meaning he's holding himself up on the staff, and he worshiped God, saying, you know, that Joseph's going to make sure this happens the way I want it to happen. So in chapter 48, you see that Joseph was told, your father is ill. So you're like, wait, weren't we just hearing he's dying? Well, he isn't quite so ill yet. So now in chapter 48, it's going to also give you some more of that detail and the recount that we need. Your father is ill, so he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. And these were the 2 sons that were born in Egypt. Hold on one second. Yeah, the 2 sons that were born to Joseph in Egypt. Okay. That's just where they were when they were born. So that's Manasseh and Ephraim. And when Jacob was told, your son Joseph has come to you, Israel rallied